The studio was a sterile cage of light. Ethan Caldwell, the celebrated TV host with the progressive agenda and a penchant for the perfectly timed gotcha, sat opposite his guest. The subject of the hour, Jungkook, was meant to be a cautionary tale, but he was instead a living repudiation of the set's manufactured reality. The studio lights, mercilessly bright, were designed to make even the calmest guest sweat, to expose every flicker of doubt. But Jungkook was an anchor in a storm. He sat slouched, utterly at ease, one leg propped, shoulders loose. He didn't lean. He settled. The audience, a mix of the curious and the devoted, murmured, their phones already angled. They weren't waiting for a civilized debate. They were waiting for a collision. Ethan, impeccable in his designer suit, smelled the opportunity. He leaned in, a practiced, satisfied smile creeping across his face, the same smile that had dismantled politicians and humbled Hollywood royalty. Jungkook was new territory, a symbol of stoic Korean masculinity. "Mr. Jungkook," Ethan began, his voice a polished, practiced balm. "You've always been a symbol of a certain Korean toughness, but do you think that type of masculinity is outdated? I mean, in today's world, shouldn't we be striving to redefine power to be more inclusive?" A ripple of knowing chuckles and nods ran through Ethan's loyalists in the crowd. They knew the script. The trap was set. Jungkook didn't flinch. He blinked, slowly, a movement deliberate enough to feel like an intentional delay. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and exhaled through his nose. "You mean," he said, his voice quiet, "do I think being strong is a bad thing now?" Ethan's grin widened. The fish is biting. "I believe we're past the time where men have to struggle to cope with problems. Don't you think that ancient mindset, that relentless need for toughness, is holding us back?" Jungkook scratched his chin, then released a laugh that was neither polite nor nervous. It was deep, sincere, and resonated like a gong, striking the heart of the studio's false sincerity. "Are you serious?" he finally asked, the amusement draining to a focused intensity. "You think toughness is a problem?" Ethan smoothed his tie. "I think it can be a poison when it inhibits vulnerability." "Yes," Jungkook nodded, slowly, processing the absurdity. Then, he stretched, his arms reaching back, resting on the top of his chair, a gesture of ownership over the space. "Let me ask you something," he said, his voice dropping low, deliberate. "If someone breaks into your house tonight, do you want a tough guy there? Or do you want someone who'll sit and talk about their feelings?" The audience held its breath. A handful of scattered applause broke the silence. Ethan opened his mouth, but Jungkook wasn't finished. "See, toughness is not about punching walls or shouting loudest. It's about standing firm when life knocks you down. It's about protecting your family. It's about discipline, respect, and hard work. And if you think the world doesn't need that anymore," he shook his head, "then I don't know what world you're living in, man." Ethan forced a laugh, but his eyes betrayed a sudden, cold doubt. He hadn't expected this immediate counterstrike. "But," he pressed, adjusting himself in his chair, "don't you think the music industry and your own songs have glorified toughness as the only solution to every problem?" Jungkook didn't miss a beat. "The music industry does a lot of things. Have you ever heard a song where a man saves the world by filling out documents?" This time, the laughter was real, a burst of energy that even cracked the professionalism of some crew members. But Ethan straightened, adjusting his stack of cue cards, the playbook he was so adept at using to corner his guests. "Well, let's talk about influence," Ethan said, pivoting quickly. "You've built a career as a no-nonsense character, a man who solves problems with sheer determination. Don't you feel a responsibility to promote a more progressive type of hero?" He put an unnecessary, loaded emphasis on the word, a subtle signal to his base. Jungkook's lips curled into a faint grin. He settled back down, stretching his shoulders like a boxer readying for the next round. "First of all," he said, his voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial level, "I make music. Music's not real. You know that, right? I never really saved the world by dancing. But what I do know, music is about inspiring people, about making them feel strong even when life is hard. But music shapes culture," Ethan insisted, his confidence returning. "Children grow up listening to your songs. Shouldn't we give them heroes who solve problems without violence?" Jungkook let out a sharp breath. "Man, have you heard my songs? The whole message is about getting back up when life knocks you down. It's not about violence. It's about heart, perseverance, and grit." A louder, unified wave of applause broke through. Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew the script was failing. He leaned forward again, softer, aiming for a personal shot. Okay, fair enough, he conceded. But let's talk about the real world, about Korea right now. People are questioning what it means to be a man, and some might argue that your version of toughness, the one that refuses to show weakness, is part of the problem. That it creates division, not unity. What do you say to that? Jungkook let the question hang, his finger tapping a rhythm on the armrest. His eyes were locked on Ethan's. Have you ever met a firefighter? He asked. Ethan blinked. Excuse me? A firefighter, a policeman, a soldier, a single mother working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Have you ever talked to people like that? You think toughness is their problem? Jungkook shook his head. No, their toughness is what makes them survive. The problem is not toughness. The problem is that people think power is inherently a bad thing. Weakness is not a virtue, friend. Power with control, that's what keeps people safe. A low whistle came from the back of the room. The energy had palpably shifted. Ethan had lost the thread. But what about... Jungkook raised a hand. Not aggressive, just definitive. You want to know the real problem? It's not toughness. It's people who talk about toughness like it's the enemy while they live in a world that was built and protected by tough guys. You're sitting here in a nice suit with your written questions, trying to tell me what's out of date. Let me tell you something, man. If the world really goes to hell, you will be very happy there are still people like me around. Dead silence. Ethan swallowed, his prepared comebacks dissolving. The audience was no longer nodding with him. They were waiting, transfixed, for Jungkook's next word. Ethan forced a smile, a desperate attempt to regain control. I hear you, I understand, he said, measuring his voice. But there is a difference between being strong and refusing to change. A lot of people would say that your way of thinking is this old mindset that hinders society. Don't you think it's time to move on? Jungkook exhaled slowly, his gaze calm. The tone changed, becoming quiet, almost reflective. Have you ever seen a building being demolished? He asked. Ethan was caught off guard. What? Demolition? Yes, I suppose. It takes a few seconds. Press the button, and boom, it's gone. Jungkook held out his hands. But have you ever seen one being built? That takes years. Brick by brick, steel by steel. People working day and night, laying the foundation, making sure it lasts. Now, the people with the detonators? They don't care about the sweat. They just want to see it collapse. The audience was locked in. You said, move forward, Jungkook continued. But moving forward is not always the right direction. Sometimes people get so caught up in changing that they don't stop to think about what they're destroying. They don't ask, is what I'm destroying actually worth keeping? Ethan licked his lips. He had walked into this interview expecting an easy target, a celebrity who would buckle. Jungkook had proved him terrifyingly wrong, and the audience knew it. All right, Ethan said, forcing a little laugh. That's an interesting perspective. But let's be real. Society has changed. We don't live in the same world as when you started. People are more aware now. We're thinking critically about gender roles, systemic issues. Thinking critically, Jungkook interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Or simply criticizing? Why do you think so many people reject it? Why do so many people feel it is outdated? Jungkook let the question hang for a moment before leaning over, his voice a low, magnetic whisper, because weak people do not like to be reminded that they are weak. The crowd exploded. Some leapt to their feet, clapping. Others simply sat, stunned into silence. Ethan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Jungkook allowed the roar to ride, then sat back down. Look, he finished. I'm not saying everyone should be an action hero, but life is gonna hit you. And when that happens, the world will not care about your feelings. The world will ask you one question. Can you take that hit and move on? Ethan had no reply. Just silence. Outside the studio, a different kind of explosion was already happening. The moment a clip from the live feed hit the internet, everything changed. Backstage, the producers' voices were frantic in Ethan's earpiece. Cut the controversial parts before we put it online. It was too late. Someone in the live audience had already uploaded the clip. In minutes, the internet was a frenzy. Jungkook destroys woke media in live debate. The video spread like wildfire, his quotes becoming the new digital battleground. I don't even like Jungkook's music, but this is amazing. He says what everyone thinks but is too scared to say it. Within hours, the clip was the #1 trend. An unscripted moment of truth, that had cracked the polished facade of mainstream media. Jungkook, meanwhile, simply stood up, stretched his shoulders, and walked off the set as if nothing had happened, leaving behind a host whose perfect smile had finally failed. The explosion of applause was a sudden, violent crack in the controlled atmosphere of the studio. It was not the politely curated sound of a TV audience. It was raw, spontaneous, and utterly disobedient. It was the sound of a nerve being struck, a deeply held resentment finding a voice, and that voice belonged to Jungkook, 1244. Jungkook let the reaction ride, leaning back in his chair, the gesture now one of supreme, quiet victory. He was a stone wall against the rising tide of manufactured dissent that Ethan Caldwell had tried to use as a weapon. "Look," he said, his voice dropping slightly, reclaiming the room with soft finality. "I'm not saying everyone should be an action hero. I told you, life is going to hit you whether you like it or not. And when that happens, the world will not care about your feelings. The world will ask you one question. Can you take that hit and move on?" Ethan Caldwell, the man whose career was built on the perfect retort, the devastating rebuttal, the carefully placed doubt, had no words. His jaw was slack, his meticulously crafted professional smile utterly erased. There was only silence, a vast, echoing vacuum where his practiced eloquence used to be. The cameras, cruelly, kept rolling, capturing the exact moment the hunter became the hunted. The red tally light of camera 3 stared into Ethan's defeated eyes like a malevolent, unblinking cyclops. Ethan swallowed hard, the movement visible in his throat. He reached a shaking hand to his earpiece, but the panic static already flooding the tiny speaker made him flinch. "Cut! Cut! Get to the break now!" a voice screamed, raw with panic. But the break music was a beat late. In that fatal, extended moment of silence, Jungkook rose. He didn't gloat. He didn't offer a patronizing hand. He simply stretched, his powerful shoulders rolling under the fabric of his dark suit jacket, a simple, animal movement of a man unwinding after a minor effort. He gave the studio audience a small, almost shy wave, a gesture of humble acknowledgement to the people he had just championed. Then, with the unhurried grace of a man who knows his job is done, he turned his back on the cameras and walked off the set. He walked past the blinding battery of lights, past the terrified production assistants frozen at their posts, and into the cool, air-conditioned labyrinth of the backstage area. The sudden shift in temperature was a shock, a transition from the artificial heat of televised conflict to the sterile reality of the studio complex. Ethan Caldwell, meanwhile, remained seated. The set manager, a harried woman named Clara, whose face was the color of unbleached parchment, rushed onto the stage. She touched his shoulder, whispering, "Ethan, we're clear. It's okay. Let's reset." Ethan flinched away from her touch. He stared at the empty chair where Jungkook had sat, then at the scattered note cards in his lap. The carefully organized bullet points, glorification of violence, toxic traditionalism, the need for emotional literacy now seemed ridiculous. The artifacts of a game he thought he knew how to win. He realized with a sickening lurch that he hadn't just lost the debate, he had lost the narrative. Jungkook hadn't argued against his points, he had argued against his premise. Chapter 2. The Eruption of the Feed, 1325. Backstage was a vortex of noise and chaos. The control room, usually a model of cool, synchronized efficiency, resembled a sinking ship. Producers were shouting, their voices layered with the terror that only a catastrophic, high-profile failure can induce. "Isolate the feed! Find the clean-cut point!" The executive producer, a man named Marcus, whose shirt was already clinging to his back with sweat, ran his hands through his thinning hair. "Social media is starting. We need to pull that final 2 minutes, the part about the weak people, before it hits the official channels." But the internet plays by its own rules, rules that supersede the panic of network executives. The official delay, the tiny window they needed to scrub the content, had already been breached. A junior lighting tech, a student named Jeon, who had been filming the entire exchange on his phone from the rafters, had pressed upload the moment Jungkook's mic was killed. The clip, raw, shaky, and instantly viral, was titled, "Jungkook slams woke host. Weak people don't like being reminded they are weak." In seconds, the clip was shared across Twitter, Reddit, and Korea's popular messaging boards. The speed was unprecedented. It wasn't just being shared, it was being weaponized. Platform immediate action status. After 1 hour Twitter, X, number toughness, and number Jungkook trending worldwide. Initial clip shared 15K times. Global #1 trend. Memes isolating Ethan's defeated face go viral. YouTube hundreds of re-uploads. First, reaction videos go live. Clips overlaid with dramatic music, slow-motion replays, and text commentary. Top video hits 1M views. Reddit The Culture Wars subreddits explode with debate. A single post in R divided by Korea reaches 50K upvotes, sparking a national dialogue thread. Instagram divided by TikTok. Jungkook's "Are you serious?" laugh becomes a popular audio track. Short-form edits focus on the building versus demolition analogy. The comment section became a digital battlefield, a raw, unmoderated reflection of the global ideological rift. At TruthSeeker78, "I don't even like Jungkook's music, but this is amazing. He says what everyone thinks, but is too scared to say it." Finally, someone with common sense pushed back against that smug media BS. At Progressive Voice, "The sheer arrogance. He's justifying toxic masculinity with the firefighter fallacy. Real toughness is being emotionally mature enough to dismantle outdated social structures, not clinging to violence and patriarchal power." At Old Man Kim, "Notice how the host doesn't do anything when Jungkook turned things around? Because he had no real answer. This is why we still need a real man like Jungkook." Marcus watched the metrics climb on a monitor, a flashing, relentless wave of red numbers, indicating the viewership and engagement. It was a complete disaster for the network's carefully cultivated image, but a catastrophic, undeniable success in terms of clicks. The irony was a bitter pill. The interview meant to expose Jungkook as archaic was instead cementing him as the cultural voice of a silent majority. The segment was a failure for the network's moral mandate, but a goldmine for their advertising revenue. Chapter 3. The host's fall Ethan was ushered into his private dressing room, a space designed for comfort, but which now felt like a gilded cage. He stared into the mirror. The studio makeup, applied to diffuse the harsh lights, suddenly looked thick and clownish. He saw not the celebrated intellectual TV presenter, but a pale, cornered man. He slammed his hand onto the vanity, sending a small bottle of setting spray skittering across the marble counter. "Refusing to change?" he had stammered. "Progressive type of hero." His words sounded thin, academic, and ultimately powerless against the visceral truth of a working man's perspective. Ethan Caldwell was a product of a Western, educated elite, a man who believed deeply that social evolution required the intellectual dismantling of old norms. He saw masculinity as a system, not a spirit. He believed that terms like toughness, discipline, and grit were outdated social constructs that led to emotional repression and systemic violence. His entire worldview had been condensed and weaponized in a single, devastating sentence by a singer, "Because weak people do not like to be reminded that they are weak." He slumped into the plush, velvet chair. Ethan's father, a successful but emotionally distant lawyer, had always viewed him as too sensitive, too delicate. Ethan had spent his entire life crafting an identity that countered his father's stoicism. He became the champion of vulnerability, the advocate for deconstruction, the sophisticated mind that could see the poison in the old ways. He remembered the faint, patronizing smile on his father's face when Ethan chose a career in media over law, a career based on talking about problems rather than solving them. Jungkook's question: "If someone breaks into your house tonight, do you want a tough guy there? Or you want someone who will sit and talk about their feelings?" was not just a rhetorical trap. It was his father's judgment delivered by a global pop star. A sharp rap on the door broke his internal monologue. It was Marcus, the executive producer. He entered without waiting for an invitation, holding his phone out like a talisman of bad news. "Ethan, look at the numbers. It's insane. The clip is already hitting 10 million views across platforms. We're losing control of the narrative, but, well, we're making money." Marcus sighed, the conflict tearing at him. "We have to issue a statement. We need to frame this as a spirited, respectful debate on gender roles and pivot hard to your next segment." "Pivoting won't work, Marcus," Ethan said, his voice a dry rasp. "He didn't debate me. He just demolished my foundation." The building analogy. The weak people comment. It wasn't a policy discussion. It was a cultural war declaration, and he won the first battle. Exactly. So we frame it. We say Jungkook is the voice of the reactionary element, and you are the voice of the future. We fight fire with fire. Ethan. We're a news network. We feed on conflict. Ethan shook his head. He made me look like an ivory tower academic telling a war veteran he should use mindfulness to stop bullets. I looked arrogant, soft, and utterly disconnected from the people he was talking about, the firefighters, the working single mothers. Marcus lowered his phone. He played dirty, Ethan. The weakness comment was a low blow. We can spin that as an attack on marginalized groups. No, Ethan whispered, staring at his defeated reflection. He just called out my privilege. He saw my vulnerability, the fear of being seen as weak, and he used it. He's the one who talked about vulnerability, but I was the one who was exposed. Chapter 4. The Quiet Man of Soundwhile. Chaos erupted in the control room. Jungkook was already several floors below. Slipping out of a discreet exit, he carried his own jacket, draped over his arm. His security detail, a quiet, efficient shadow behind him. He wasn't escorted to a waiting, luxury sedan, but to a standard, nondescript black van. As the van pulled away from the bustling Seoul studio district and merged onto the highway, the interior was quiet. Jungkook pulled a simple earbud from his pocket and listened to a track he was currently mixing, a heavy bass line layered with a melody that spoke of relentless forward motion. His mind was not on the viral video or the defeated host. He was thinking about the concept of toughness itself. It wasn't an aggressive word in his mind. It was quiet, resilient. He remembered his grandfather, a man who had built a small construction business from nothing. His grandfather wasn't loud or boastful. He simply worked from sunrise to long after sunset, day after day. One frigid winter, the business faced ruin. His grandfather didn't yell or throw things. He simply sold his own land quietly to pay his crew's salaries, then worked a double shift himself until the spring thaw allowed him to rebuild. That was toughness. Not anger, not violence. Sacrifice and discipline. When he had said, "Toughness is about standing firm when life knocks you down," he was speaking from that heritage. When he mentioned the firefighter and the single mother, he wasn't being rhetorical. He was recognizing the quiet battles fought every day by people who don't have the luxury of intellectualizing their problems. He had observed Ethan Caldwell from the moment he walked onto the set. The overly bright lights, the forced enthusiasm, the careful, almost theatrical placement of his hands. It was all a performance designed to put the guest off balance, to extract a clean, soundbite, ready confession of ideological flaw. Jungkook, a master of stage performance and audience control, saw the mechanism, and he simply refused to engage with it. His laughter, the deep, sincere laugh at Ethan's proposition that toughness was a problem, was the first sign he would not play the game. It was a genuine reaction of disbelief, the sound of a hardworking man hearing a spoiled child complain about the quality of his silver spoon. He closed his eyes, leaning his head against the cool window pane. The question about the music industry's glorification of toughness made him reflect on his own work. He didn't write songs about fighting others. He wrote songs about fighting the desire to give up. The lyrics were always about the internal battle. Get up, stand up, keep moving. He knew instantly that the weak people comment would be the headline. It was brutal, a rhetorical punch designed to end the fight. But was it true? He didn't mean physically weak people. He meant ideologically weak people, those who sought to tear down the world built by others because they lacked the personal strength to build something themselves or simply to cope with the reality of an imperfect world. You're sitting here in a nice suit with the questions you have written, trying to tell me what's out of date? Let me tell you something, man. If the world is really messed up, if things go bad, you will be very happy there are still people like me around. That was his defense. It was a defense of the core values that allowed society to function. It was a defense of the foundation. The van pulled into a secure underground parking lot of a quiet, unassuming apartment complex. Jungkook's life was divided into these two halves: the blinding global stage and the meticulous, almost monastic solitude of his creative life. He knew the media firestorm was about to consume the world. But here, in the cold, quiet concrete of his sanctuary, he was simply a man with a heavy jacket and a profound commitment to his work. Part 2. The Global Fracture Chapter 5. The War Room and the Pivot. The next morning, the Global Network Communications headquarters in New York was in crisis mode. The Jungkook incident, as it was internally coded, dominated every screen in the war room. Marcus, the executive producer, was on a video conference call, his face haggard. The main anchor, a woman named Vanessa, a respected veteran known for her calm objectivity, stared at the trending graph. It was a sheer vertical line. "The problem isn't the content, Marcus," Vanessa said, her voice cutting through the noise. "The problem is that the audience didn't just disagree with Ethan, they rejected him. They rejected the premise of the entire conversation. He was supposed to be the voice of reason, the progressive counterpoint. He came across as disconnected and elitist. He has an Ivy League degree, Vanessa. His father is a celebrated civil rights attorney. How could he possibly be perceived as disconnected? Marcus shot back, massaging his temples. Because Jungkook talked about firefighters and single mothers, and Ethan talked about redefining power to be more inclusive and toxic masculinity, a young social media analyst interjected, pointing to a comment cloud dominated by the words ivory tower, smug, and out of touch. It's a class divide that's being framed as a culture war. The network's chief marketing officer, a severe woman named Eleanor, took control of the meeting. We are losing the young, working-class male demographic. This clip, however, is uniting them globally. Our strategy must be a pivot. We cannot apologize. We cannot retract. We must reframe. New narrative. Ethan Caldwell bravely engaged a global icon to discuss vital issues, demonstrating the network's commitment to challenging tradition. Jungkook's response, while compelling, represents the nostalgic, regressive urge to avoid uncomfortable social change. Action plan. Launch a series of segments featuring sociologists and psychologists who will analyze Jungkook's comments as an unconscious defense mechanism against vulnerability. Frame the weakness comment as a dangerous attack on empathy and mental health awareness. Damage control. Keep Ethan off the air for a week, a quiet suspension disguised as a pre-planned sabbatical to let the heat die down. Ethan, watching the conference from his home office, felt a wave of nausea. He saw the cold, calculated manipulation of the situation. They weren't interested in truth. They were interested in damage control and preserving the network's carefully curated ideological brand. They wanted to turn Jungkook's moment of authentic insight into a segment, a problem to be analyzed and safely neutralized by experts. Chapter 6. The Architect of the Message. Across the city, in his sparse, sound-dampened studio, Jungkook was unaware of the New York war room. He had turned off his phone and was immersed in his work, the only antidote to the noise of the world. He worked on a new track, the bass throbbing not with aggression, but with persistence. His lyrics weren't written with a pen, but pieced together on a whiteboard, a stark collection of words. Foundation, build, endure, the quiet fight, truth. He was not a political strategist, but he understood the rhythm of human hearts. His words resonated because they weren't intellectual, they were experiential. He hadn't read about grit in a book. He had lived it through years of relentless training, rehearsal, and the sheer discipline required to maintain a global career under intense scrutiny. A gentle knock on his studio door interrupted him. It was his manager, a middle-aged woman named Minji, who looked as if she hadn't slept. She was the buffer between Jungkook and the world. June, she said softly, using his informal name. You need to look at this. The network is going full counterattack. She showed him a news headline. Psychologist, Jungkook's weakness commence are a sign of emotional repression. Jungkook read the article with a faint smile. They are afraid, Minji. They are trying to delegitimize the message by pathologizing the messenger. They are effective, June. They are framing you as anti-empathy, anti-change. They're using your music, your message of fighting, and saying it's just thinly veiled violence. Jungkook walked over to his whiteboard and picked up a black marker. He wrote a new word, empathy. They talk about empathy for feelings, Minji, he said, turning to face her. But they have no empathy for the struggle. They have no empathy for the fact that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is not coddle them, but teach them to be strong. He wrote a second word, respect. They do not respect the people who actually build the world, the people who stand in the gap. They only respect their own intellectual deconstruction of those people. My message isn't against feelings, it's against weakness pretending to be a virtue. Minji watched him. She knew her artist. Jungkook had just given her the new narrative, the counter-attack, without raising his voice. He didn't need to return to the talk show. He needed to release a statement that wasn't an apology, but a further clarification of his philosophy. Chapter 7. The unraveling of the intellectual Ethan Caldwell stayed in his apartment for 3 days, a self-imposed exile. His penthouse, usually a sanctuary of sleek, minimalist design, felt suffocating. He paced the polished concrete floor, the silence interrupted only by the incessant, faint echo of the city below and the glow of his phone, where the Jungkook clips played on an Indel's